and bucket seats. Sweet six-cylinder Mustang, power-packed and really stacked. Sweet six-cylinder Mustang, low gas diet made me try it. Sweet six-cylinder Mustang, you're my kind of car. Yes, you really are.
Motoring 94 is brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil. And Midas, for brake, exhaust, suspension, and steering service. Trust your car to Midas.
This week, Motoring 94 has traveled to Southern California. We're in the Santa Ynez Valley, just outside of Santa Barbara. This is cowboy country. We're at a guest ranch, and this is a ranch where guests come to play golf, tennis, and ride horses. And these particular horses are known as Mustangs. And we're here to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Mustang. Not the horse, the car.
Mustang. Mustang. Mustang is coming. Mustang is coming April 17th. The unexpected, the new Ford Mustang at your Ford dealers.
The Ford Mustang came at a time when baby boomers were entering the car buying market. They wanted a high-performance sports car with a stick shift and bucket seats, and that's what the Mustang offered for a price of $2,500. The New York's World Fair was the site for what would be the most important product launches in automotive history.
Out of the Ford Pavilion, there's a daydream corner called Mustang. This is the car that dreams are made of. Dream your own Mustang. Take your choice of a 6 or 3 V8s. Power steering, power brakes, automatic or standard transmission, dozens of options. But as standard equipment, you get bucket seats, wall-to-wall carpeting, all vinyl upholstery, padded instrument panel, and full wheel covers. Even though Mustang is a dream, its low price is a beautiful reality. Test drive one right now at your Ford dealers in Pleasant Dreams.
The Mustang was a dream come true for Ford. Hoping to sell 100,000 Mustangs the first year, the final figure was 263,000. More than 500,000 sold in 1965 and another 500,000 in '66. The total to date, 6.1 million. 1994 is the Mustang's 30th anniversary, but few changes have been made to the car in almost 15 years. With the arrival of GM's popular Camaro, Ford decided it was time to redesign the Mustang and hopefully revive Mustang fever.
Mustang is a love affair. When the 64 Mustang came out, people had a love affair. And it will be very, very nice to generate, especially in Canada in the cold weather, to generate a lot of traffic in showrooms during the month of December as people come back to fall in love with the Mustang.
Well, a Mustang is a horse that's just born in the wild. He's just like any wild animal. He doesn't have any owner. He's born in the wild and mostly in government ground. And he runs wild until someone captures him. And he could be any breed that could have went wild. And then he has descendants. And then they were just born in the wild, and that's what they are, wild horses. And basically the ones I've had experience with, they're all extra strong. Because they've had to fend for themselves. And by most part, they wonderful disposition because it's the first time they've ever had in their life that some kind treatment that they have had feed and been cared for. This horse here is, you couldn't ask for a better horse in anybody's breed.
Mustang, to me, has the opportunity to greatly improve the image of the company, to be a traffic builder in the month of December for our dealers when normally traffic is slow, and then carry it all the way through the winter months, to be a sales improvement because it'll, I think, have significant sales improvement over the former model, and then bring in the youth back to Ford and really improve our image. I think that's one of our real pluses with this vehicle.
The new Mustang will come in 2 versions, a V6 powered base model with 145 horsepower and a V8 powered GT with 215 horsepower. Both models are available as a coupe or soft top with manual or automatic transmission. A 240 horsepower Cobra is also planned for the spring of '94.
There's over 400 Mustang clubs in 25 countries. So we talked to club presidents. There's 5 magazines that just cater to Mustang. We've talked to editors. We talked to Mustang owners, non-Mustang owners, Ford owners, non-Ford owners, you name it. What did you want the Mustang to be? What they said, they wanted a lot of heritage in it. They wanted it to be a North American product. They didn't want it to look Japanese. They didn't want it to look European, but they wanted to have the safety and the performance that people expected in the 90s.
The car, with or without badging, had to say Mustang. It was really important to them. They wanted to see some of the retro, if you will, retro cues from the earlier cars. And along that line, things that we found that were really important to them and that we wanted to stay with. They wanted a chrome pony in the front of the car. They wanted the horseback on the car in a prominent position. They wanted a 3-element taillight. They wanted us to take a look at the side of the car and find out whether or not we could put the character back in the side of the car, the chamfer, if you will, the reverse C in the side of the car. So we looked at that. We looked at the cockpit of the car versus some early models, and we wanted kind of a dual cockpit feeling. We wanted a long front and a shorter rear in terms of the perception of the car as you looked at it. And we sort of took those basics, and we think we executed right along the lines they're looking for.
See, 2 things are significant this year. I celebrate my 30th anniversary with Ford Motor Company, and Mustang celebrates its 30th anniversary. I can remember going out for my interview on the plane and reading the front cover of the New York Times magazine. It had a Mustang on it. To me, that was Ford Motor Company at the time, and this will be Ford Motor Company again in 1994.
There's an old saying, they don't make them like they used to. With all of the hype surrounding the release of the '94 Mustang, it looks as though Ford are out to dispel that particular myth. Next week on Test Drive, we'll find out if there's any steak to go along with the sizzle as we put the new Mustang through its paces. In the meantime, it's time to introduce you to our 3 new long-term testers. Now this is the 1994 Hyundai Elantra. In '93, we gave it our Economy Car of the Year. What better way to find out if it'll stand the test of time than a long-term test? Next up, we have the 1994 Nissan Axess, a very interesting alternative to a minivan and indeed a conventional station wagon. Last and by no means least, we have the 1994 Volkswagen Jetta, a car that's been totally redesigned for 1994. It's obvious that Volkswagen are pinning their hopes on this vehicle to improve their sales percentage in the marketplace.
Test Drive with Graham Fletcher.
This week on Test Drive, we look at the 1994 Toyota Supra. Now, when it was announced, some thought that it would come with a V6, others thought it would come with a V8. Some actually thought it might not come at all. Well, I can tell you that the Supra has arrived, and arrived in style. Removing the Supra's sport roof is accomplished with relative ease. Undo 4 bolts and a center lock with the tool provided, and off it comes. Now, the panel is light enough to make this a one-man operation. To avoid damage when removed, the trunk has been equipped with some special hold-downs. Driving the Supra topless has an upside and a downside. On the upside is the sheer thrill of driving what is, to all intents and purposes, a convertible. The downside is the amount of cowl shape that develops when the roof is removed. The amount of body flex is such that on rougher roads the car begins to feel skittish. So if you do plan on using the Supra to its full potential, leave the lid on. The other source of annoyance are two wind deflectors that pop up when the roof panel is removed. The amount of wind noise is worse with these things up than if you hold them down. They either need removing or redesigning. The styling of this new Supra is wonderful. Its lines are almost fluid and its proportions almost perfect. That is, until you get back to this rear spoiler. It's just too big in comparison to everything else on the vehicle. Now, I for one don't think it does much for the car, and I'd dearly love to have a look at one of these things minus this spoiler. The instrument cluster has been designed like an open horseshoe. This concept ensures that all controls are at one's fingertips. The plus is that all controls, like mirrors, locks, windows, etc., are well marked and simple to operate. The result is that you can keep your eyes on the road when operating most of them. Not a bad idea given the gusto. On the safety front, the new Supra comes with twin airbags, traction control and anti-lock brakes. Toyota built the Supra as a 2+2. Now, as you can see, head and leg room are definitely very tight, meaning that it is a 2+2. However, where it has a distinct advantage over, say, the Corvette or the RX-7 is that you can actually get an extra 2 people into the vehicle. Now, it helps if you're vertically challenged, but at least it's usable. The seats provide plenty of support in all the right areas, especially laterally. Add to that a perfectly placed dead pedal and you're not going anywhere when you begin to have fun. The only comment here is that people with a slightly more portly girth than mine will find the side bolsters tight and quite possibly uncomfortable. Trunk space in the Supra is at a premium, especially with the top stored. For most people, folding down the back seat and making use of the extra space is going to be a fact of life. The secret to the Supra is the engine. You see, there are very few engines in the world capable of producing 100 horsepower per litre. This is a 3-litre engine and it's rated at 320 horsepower and 315 pounds-feet of torque. The secret to that amount of output is down to the ductwork, an air-to-air intercooler and a 2-way twin-turbo setup. I'll have more on that in a moment, but before I close the hood, I just want to mention ahead of all of that technology is a really wimpy horn. Now, a decent car deserves a decent horn. Do us a favour, give us a manly man's horn. The 2-way twin-turbo setup is a clever way of ensuring a broad torque band and loads of horses. Rather than using one large turbo, the Supra uses 2 small compact units. The first turbo provides boost at low RPM and engine load. As demand for power increases, the second turbo kicks in, working in conjunction with the first, providing superior performance at the top end. With the 0 to 100k time at a hair over 5 seconds, I think it becomes obvious that this sophisticated system works well. Matched with this new engine is a terrific new 6-speed manual transmission. The gate is compact and the shifts very precise. The clutch action and feel is superb, making this road rocket very easy to drive in the city. Fuel economy during the test averaged 12.2 litres per 100 kilometres or 23 miles per gallon. Given the performance and the fact that one hardly ever travels slowly in this automobile, these figures are better than I anticipated. The reason the Supra handled the pylon test so well is simple. It's down to 2 key elements. First of all, there's a whopping set of tyres on this car. 2 55/40s up back and 2 35/45s up front here. Combine that with a very usable and workable suspension. It's double wishbone, very nice and compliant. It provides you with a perfect car for the pylon test. However, when winter arrives, this setup is far from perfect. You'll have to trade these babies in for a set of snows. Stopping power is provided by an enormous set of ventilated disc brakes. Drop the anchor and the Supra stops on a dime. During the test, I required 112 feet to stop from 80k. To keep the brakes cool during spirited driving, there is some ducting that directs air directly to the brake. The 2 side scoops, therefore, are functional rather than cosmetic. As one might expect, ABS is standard on the Supra. A lot of the hardware used for the ABS is shared by the traction control system. The track system, as Toyota call it, not only applies the brake to the spinning wheel, but also controls engine output. Decreasing engine power and braking the offending wheel at the same time ensure optimum control. Unlike many other systems, this system functions throughout the operating range, meaning that it keeps you on the straight and narrow as well as assisting in pulling away in bad weather. Well, that's it for this week's test drive. I said in the beginning that the car had arrived in style, and that I think I've proved. The only thing is, I think some people are going to quibble about the price. $60,000 isn't cheap. However, it'll separate the men from the boys, and I, for one, think it's worth every penny. We're back out in Mustang country in the Santa Ynez Valley in Southern California. And you know, part of the Ford promotional campaign to launch the Mustang was to ask people if they can remember when they first saw the Ford Mustang. Well, we're now heading to the garage to join Bill Gardner. Let's find out if Bill can recall his first Mustang sighting.
Brad, I could tell you exactly where I was when the Americans first walked on the moon, or when Paul Henderson scored that goal in '72, but as far as seeing my first Mustang, I couldn't tell you. But one question that I am asked a lot is where to buy a used car and what represents a good deal, or what things we should look for when analyzing a used piece of machinery. Now, if you're not 100% comfortable with this kind of thing, I'd suggest that when you're going to look at used vehicles, you take somebody with you who has that gut feeling for machinery. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a mechanic, just somebody who's in touch with cars and machinery. Now, personally, I prefer to buy a car from a private individual. I don't trust dealers at all, but in some cases it's just purely easier from a logistical standpoint to shop dealers. But be very careful, because they tend to mask things over, clean things up, and preen and pamper the engine, spray it with lacquer, etc. It looks larger than life, it looks really good, but maybe yesterday it was really a neglected piece of junk. In any case, you can see by all the dirt and crud under the hood of this vehicle, nobody's tried to mask anything over. And as bad as that may look to some people, believe it or not, I'd rather have a look at a vehicle in this real world kind of condition than one of those ones that's been all dolled up. I can read between the lines a lot easier on something like this. I look for things that have maybe been disturbed recently, and that's the key areas I want to see why that area has been serviced or repaired. If it's been all dolled up, it's kind of hard to tell. In any case, one of the most important things to do is make a really good test drive analysis of that vehicle, and that should be a minimum half an hour, 10 or 15 minutes of stop and start city type driving, and about the same on the highway at higher speeds. One thing you want to make sure is don't take somebody with you that's going to yak and natter when you're trying to listen to that vehicle. You don't want any unnecessary distractions like that. So turn off things like the radio and any outside distractions that you can get rid of them. Windows up so that you minimize wind noise. Then you can listen to that machinery working. You can get a feel for how that thing drives, performs. If it sounds good, drives good, feels well, you can probably assume that the car is in pretty good shape. But if it just doesn't feel right to you and it's pulling to the left or shaking at higher speeds, the engine sounds like it's knocking or banging, you know, these are things that should really turn you off that vehicle or make you look closer at certain areas, and maybe they should be taken into consideration on the price as well. When you get back from that test drive, have a look underneath the vehicle and make sure that there's no drippings in any one key area, and if there is, well, you can follow those back to their most likely source. And there again, you may want to take that into consideration certainly on the price of the vehicle, and maybe whether or not you even want to pursue it further. And as far as taking the car to a mechanic goes, it's not absolutely necessary, because keep in mind that if you brought me 50 used cars, I'm probably going to find a fault with at least 48 or 49 of those. Any seasoned used car is going to have some weaknesses in certain areas. But if it looks good, feels good, and drives well, and you've had another person give you analysis of it that's familiar with, has a gut feeling for machinery, maybe that's the car you want to go with. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 94.
The 1994 model year sees the reintroduction of a V12 engine in the Jaguar XJ12. The engine, while based on the original 12-cylinder, has been improved significantly. The capacity increases from 5.3 liters to an even 6 with 301 horsepower. It's matched with a dual-mode 4-speed automatic transmission. includes a passenger side airbag and diamond-turned wheels. Only 30 XJ12s will be available in Canada, and Jaguar expects to sell them all.
The demographic for this car is a highly targeted group of perhaps 35 individuals in Canada who have traditionally purchased Jaguar's flagship sedan offering. They typically earn in excess of $250,000 a year to be able to purchase an XJ12, and they want to rise above the sea of German and Japanese luxury cars that are so prevalent among affluent people, and they want to be seen as being just a little different. You know, a Jaguar does make that statement.
The XJ12 features every comfort and convenience item known to man, including a passenger seat that is equipped with a 2-position memory. The only option is a cellular phone. Canadian snowbirds will be paying more when they head south this winter. Not only is the Canadian dollar buying less, but vacationers will now pay more for car rentals. Hertz is raising rates about 12%. Daily rates will rise by $5, and weekly rates will increase by $20. Other rental companies also expect to announce rate hikes. They say they have to pay the car makers 30% more for the 94 models than they did for the 93s.
Here's a Midas tip on determining the condition of a used car or truck's engine. Now, you can shampoo the outside and make it look like new, but it's very hard to mask over or hide years of neglect on the inside. One good place to start is by looking at the engine oil on the dipstick. But you can be fooled here as well. If the car's had a recent oil change and maybe some flushing additive prior to an oil change, it may appear quite clean when in fact inside it's pretty dirty. What you want to do is go to the area where the engine oil is added. Take the oil fill cap off and take your finger with the engine off, of course, and reasonably cool, and see how far you can reach inside that area and see what you come up with. If you come up with sludgy solids like that, that's an indication that either the engine didn't have regular oil changes, or maybe it had a low level or slight engine coolant leak, antifreeze getting in and mixing with the oil. That's not an uncommon occurrence on many of today's engines, and it spells a fairly short life for the engine. It's certainly a major factor in determining engine cleanliness, and something that you might want to pay strict attention to. If you're buying a used car with that condition, you may be into some major repairs in the not too distant future. That's your Midas tip of the week.
How has the mighty Mustang fallen? That's coming up next in Kenzie's Corner.
Kenzie's Corner with Jim Kenzie.
In 1964, Ford had one of their better ideas. They took the prosaic, not to mention dull Falcon sedan and draped it with this pretty two-door bodywork. They called it the Mustang. Now, Lee Iacocca took all the credit for this car, but of course, failure is an orphan and success has many parents. And this car was a success of major proportions. Not only did it sell well in its cooking versions like this one, but they managed to turn this into some pretty serious race cars as well. Now, over the last 30 years, the Mustang's gone through several generational changes. Now, for 1994, it's ended up with this. Now, the Mustang has always been a tough car, a macho car, a He-Man's car, a bang-for-the-buck car. Look at this thing. It's all these fat curves and these rounded roofline. This could be a Japanese car. That's not a Mustang. Now, underneath, it's still got the 5-liter V8 engine that'll light the tires up at the drop of a clutch, and next year it'll have an even stronger engine with 4 overhead camshafts. But it's still going to look like that. Where's Lee Iacocca when you really need him? I'm Jim Kenzie.
So we've heard Jim Kenzie's opinion on the new Mustang, but Graham Fletcher has been riding the range out here in Mustang country with this car, and he is chomping at the bit to give you his opinion. We'll have that and much more next week as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
Motoring 94 has been brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil. And Midas, for brake, exhaust, suspension, and steering service, trust your car to Midas.